Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Wendell, and this is Lead Well MD, a podcast that explores how leaders can transform healthcare through emotionally intelligent, effective clinician leadership. In today's episode, I'm joined by a longtime colleague and someone I deeply respect, Dr. Greg Johnson. Greg has led at scale. He has shaped national conversations on equity and brought heart and humility to every role he's held. In this episode, we dig into a powerful and timely topic, the intersection of vulnerability, authenticity, and leadership, especially in high-stakes healthcare environments. You'll hear us explore how showing up as fully human, not perfectly polished, can unlock connection, psychological safety, and ultimately better outcomes for teams and patients alike. So if you're looking for a conversation with some honesty and with some heart, then this episode is for you. I am super excited to be joined today by Dr. Greg Johnson, who I've known for more than a decade now across a few different organizations. Dr. Johnson serves as the System Vice President and Chief Medical Officer at UnityPoint Health, where he oversees the clinical enterprise for 17 acute care hospitals and 19 rural affiliates. Previously, Dr. Johnson was Chief Executive Officer of Hospital Medicine and Chief Health Equity and Diversity Officer at Sound Physicians, where he managed over 200 clinical practices and almost 4,000 physicians, advanced practitioners, and nurses across 45 states. He was recently recognized as one of the chief medical officers to know by Becker's Healthcare. Congratulations. And in 2023 was named a Black healthcare executive to know. Awesome. Dr. Johnson got his MD from the McGovern School of Medicine in Houston, Texas. He completed a combined internal medicine and family practice residency at the Ochsner Clinic in New Orleans, where he also served as chief resident. And additionally, he earned a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leadership Certificate from Northwestern University. So impressive stuff, Greg. Thank you so much for coming on and being here with me today.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see you. Really good. There are so many conversations that I think you and I could have, a lot of things that we could talk about. But recently you put a very thought-provoking post on LinkedIn about the delicate balance between being professional and showing some vulnerability and being open as a leader. And that's really what I want to focus our attention on today. I'm sure your post resonated with a lot of people. And this is a topic that I've heard a lot of clinicians speak about. It's something that I think a lot of people struggle with, that they've had, trouble finding the balance. So can you share what inspired you to write the post? Was there something in particular that struck you?
Well, I try to post things that are authentic to me and are part of my leadership journey. There are things that are certainly important to me. And I know part of my leadership journey was in finding my feet as a leader and trying to be a good one is recognizing when I'm not doing particularly well. And whether you want to call it imposter syndrome or anything else, fairly early in my career, it was about the stoic leader that was impervious to all, knows everything, can handle any problem, never got down, complete Superman complex.
Right.
And I recognized that when I led from that position, I wasn't the greatest leader, mostly because I was considered inaccessible. And recognize, particularly in healthcare, ultimately we're in the business, we are people taking people. And when we're leaders people taking care of people who are taking care of people.
Yep.
If at the end of the day, you are inaccessible and people can't reach you, therefore they can't understand you. If they can't understand you, you can't lead. Nobody's going to follow you up any hill. Nobody's going to work with you in any problem situation because you're unrelatable.
Yeah.
And so for me, the impetus for the post was really reflecting on, and I know I shared this with you in private, but I don't like the word vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's an uncomfortable space to be in.
Yeah.
But recognizing that it's a requirement for people to access you as a human being.
Yeah.
And it's a requirement for people to be comfortable sharing about themselves and their own flaws in order to make things better for the people that we're ultimately serving, who are the people in clinics and in our bedside. And so that's why I posted it. It was just about saying, hey, look, I recognize this, and I hope other people can access that as well.
You're not alone, Greg, in that feeling about being uncomfortable with that word. It's something I've heard in many rooms with many clinicians, that it's just something that kind of goes against the way you were trained. You're not out there to show any sort of perceived weakness, right? So tell me a little more about that. As a physician, as a leader, why is that word so tough for people?
Well, I think it's tough because it's admitting, right, you're flawed, and it's admitting nobody, I think we all know it. Nobody likes to say it. I think that
we all worry about it.
Exactly. And I think we spend a fair amount of time recognizing that, oh, well, I need to be the best, and I need to do this and that and the other. I think that the discomfort with it is of the unknown, and that people could use it against you or judge you, and recognizing that vulnerability and, again, connecting with people means that you are going to have to take those risks, that people aren't going to do that. And actually what I've certainly found is most people in kind go, oh, I can access, I'm willing to open up myself a little bit more. And then it comes the flywheel that we all look for in everything of, I'm comfortable, you're comfortable. Now we can have those honest conversations that ultimately lead to, again, better outcomes for whatever we're engaged in.
Right. What's interesting too is I think a lot of people equate vulnerability with weakness. They think it's somehow, do you know Brene Brown? She speaks a lot. I love her. She said in one of her talks that vulnerability is really the highest measure of courage. It's what we want to see in other people, but it's the thing that we're most afraid of showing in ourselves. Right. But how brave is that? Right. That to me.
It's incredibly accurate. And I think that, to your point, you see it in other people and you want to replicate it, and you remind yourself you want to be the change in the world. And so you got to take those steps.
But bit by bit, right?
Exactly.
And that's what I want to talk about too. So tell me something. I love storytelling if you're willing, but you said in that post about how showing that vulnerability can build that deeper level of trust with people, and that connection, that human connection that's so important, especially in healthcare. As a leader, as a human, but certainly in healthcare. Is there a time that you can think of or describe that you chose to lean into that discomfort and show some vulnerability?
I think, well, I'll talk about, and I don't know if it was successful or not. I'm enjoying my time here at UnityPoint, but I'll speak to something that was recent, because it was new to the system. I'm new to the state. I'm the new guy.
Yeah.
And nobody knows me. They want to know that you're, and who is this person with whom we're working?
Okay.
And I did share the story of how I got into medicine, and yes, I'm a doctor's kid, but that really wasn't the drive to get me to do all this work. And I began sharing of that it was a patient, and it was a patient that grossed everybody out. All of my pre-med students that were with me, one of them literally retched over in the corner, and they all left.
Wow.
And I was standing there, and I remember turning to the intern, and I said, this doesn't look compatible with life. What are we doing?
Yeah.
And he explained that this is what we're going to do. And it was about not just the science was going on, but watching the fact that over the 6 weeks that I was doing, it wasn't anything spectacular. I wasn't transplanting a heart. I was cleaning a dirty wound every day. But I was talking with the patient, and because he was healing, and watched him reconnect with his family, and watched how the health system essentially surrounded him so he could heal. But his healing wasn't just the wound I saw. It was the healing of reintegrating him into his family unit. And when I shared that story, and I did have somebody come up to me and they were just like, I can talk to you. Yeah. And, it's a vulnerable moment, because I share it more openly now. It was very personal for me, and it's not a story that I felt comfortable sharing because it was, my brain and I'm super smart and this is the way.
Right.
That's not it.
It was a
Why I
feeling
got it.
moment.
It was a healing moment, and it was it was talking about my father. And yes, I was a doctor's kid, but I saw him work really hard, but understanding that where we were in Texas and the role that he served in that community, he was health access.
Yeah.
And that's why it wasn't that it was Dr. Johnson, he was strutting around. It was what he meant
Right.
to that community. And that's why I got in. And,
Yep.
and so, it was sharing those stories, and it was me sharing that. And then people say, I can speak to you. And I can feel comfortable because vulnerability, you have to equate some level with authenticity. Like,
Yes.
if you're trying to come off as perfect, probably not authentic.
No.
And so let's share that we are vulnerable, we are human, where we connect, knowing that you can be comfortable being wrong.
Right.
And just accepting our humanity that way.
It's so interesting. You're just reminding me of so many times I've heard in different rooms of physicians when they start to recognize that you don't have to come into leadership to be something that you're not, right? That certain level of authenticity, certainly you want to fine tune and build skill and be the best version of you that you can be in that role, right? But I think a lot of people come into it thinking they have to be a certain thing. I have to be super outgoing, and I have to be charismatic, and I have to be instantly decisive. And, there's all these sort of stereotypical things that people think, but when they start to realize that so much about leadership is purpose, it's connection, it's finding who you really are and bringing that best part of you to bear. I think that's really can be very profound for people. And I think that is what people connect with.
It's very true. I can say, and again, it's been a good leadership journey, and I've certainly been imperfect with it, that I know early in career, it was like trying to show up that way and recognizing I'm bad at this job.
Yeah. I mean, think about the downside of having to be perfect. You got to carry everything all the time for everybody. And God forbid, right? You err.
And your own personal well-being you're right. At some point in time, that's going to create burnout. And I can't carry this any longer. And so, just opening yourself up a little bit and giving yourself that bit of grace as well.
Yeah, no kidding. So there's an interesting sort of juxtaposition here too. We talk about people want to be authentic, and there's a distinction between oversharing. So that I think is where people really do struggle, is finding that line between how do I show up as myself when I'm concerned, when I'm worried about things, but then tipping into the place where maybe I'm oversharing a little too much and that's undermining my leadership. So how do you figure that out?
Yeah, I think so. Am I more vulnerable than I have been in my career? I still probably undershare. Mostly because I'm trying to be thoughtful of how much is too much, because again, people have varying comfort levels, their own comfort level. And as I think I'm learning and interacting with folks, certainly within my first year here, it is being very thoughtful about, first, I want to listen.
Sure.
And make sure that I'm acknowledging what their comfort level is. And then in some instances, it's also saying, hey, I actually do want to share something with you. Are you comfortable with me doing it? I absolutely had people go, no, okay. But I think for me, it is particularly with other individuals, is what is going to help further this relationship in a positive way. And it is a professional relationship. And so can I bring something that says, hey, you know what? I'm actually okay with your telling me no. And in fact, I think it's a better result by because a lot of what we talk about vulnerability is, and particularly as somebody with a titular leadership of I'm the assistant medical officer, and you're going to come in and I'm like, guys, I am wrong.
Yeah.
And actually just left a meeting where I thought it was going to go one direction and it pivoted very strongly. And people came back and they're like, you okay? And I was like, that was the greatest result that could have happened, because you all thought about what needed to happen. You finally came to the conclusion, and then you articulate, recognize that this is a safe enough space to say it. And I'm not going to growl at you and say,
Yep.
we're going to go this other direction. We came to a better decision.
Right.
But that required people to feel comfortable. And I do think part of people feeling comfortable and creating that psychological safety is recognizing that I'm vulnerable. I can be wrong. I'm willing to admit that. And I'm willing to accept a different decision than maybe where I would have taken it before.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And Amy Edmondson, when she talks about psychological safety, she talks a lot about responding productively, right? So if somebody steps up and takes a risk and says something to you that you might not like, your response to that is so critical, isn't it, to maintain
absolutely.
that? Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So what would you say to somebody who really is trying to start with this? And I think that the environment that you're in healthcare, it's high stakes, it's high stress, right? And decisions matter and people can be afraid to be too vulnerable. What would you say to someone like that about how to get more comfortable with it?
Yeah, I don't know that it's helpful in all the cases, but I say embrace the fear. To this day, I still get scared about moments, even when it's stuff that I've shared because it's a new audience, it's a new thing, and it's that what's going to come with it. I know I've said this in other places. For us to grow, certainly as leaders and absolutely as people, you have to embrace a level of discomfort because when you are sitting back and you're comfortable, probably not growing. And for me, that opportunity to continue to grow and develop, I have to chase that. And then when I recognize that, unfortunately, vulnerability is tied to that.
Yeah.
Getting involved and saying, okay, that terrifies me. Okay, what can I do? How can I do this? Is there a person I can practice with to share it? Because we do have trusted individuals in our lives that you can pull in and say, okay, I want to do this. How does this sound? And they can tell you when you're oversharing. I mean, I'm not one for role playing a whole bunch, but sometimes it is just that, hey, you're talking a lot with your hands. You probably want to put down. Your shoulders are really tight. You look like you're nervous.
Yeah.
Those little things of recognizing those are the cues and just recognizing that it is those increments. It's those little moments. And I forget, I can't remember if you taught me this or somebody else. It's about those Johari windows. Like if you just open it up just a little bit at a time, you're giving people insight and you're able to do it. And so it's, think of it as incremental, embrace what you can in terms of that. And recognize that you will be imperfect at being vulnerable too. Yeah. And that's okay.
And that's okay. Yeah. That Johari, I love that. Ask a little bit more than you know and tell a little bit more. And they always say that extending trust out by sharing a little bit more than you're comfortable with, just a bit by bit, is one of the best ways to build trust in you too. And the other thing that struck me when you were talking is about leaning into the anxiety of it, the fear of it. My daughter struggles with anxiety. And one of the things I always say is that being brave it's not about just not having any fear, right? Being brave is feeling it and doing it anyway. To me, that is bravery. So leaning in to that discomfort, and being measured. Like you said, everybody's comfort level with that is different. Everybody differs in how willing they are, but bit by bit. So another thing that you talked about in your post that I really liked was this idea about creating space for other people to speak. Obviously, that's part of psychological safety, but how do you intentionally create space for other people in your team, especially diverse opinions, like you said, like in the meeting? So how do you do that?
Well, I think some of it depends, again, on the grouping. I think certainly when you're leading, it is being cognizant of how inclusive is the conversation. And it is about examining the room. It is about examining, like, have I heard from such and such person? And being intentional about asking them. I did a old podcast that I had, and I remember it was an individual on there whom I thought was exceptionally bright. And I was like, you could never have been. And she was like, I would never raise my hand for anything. And I certainly wasn't going to be called on for leadership. And it wasn't until somebody pulled me in and affirmed that I can do this that I did it. And that had remained with me. And I tried to do it before then, but that I was like, I'm making sure in every meeting, everybody knows what they're going to say. And and you pick up other leadership tips, one of which was be comfortable with silence. And it's very funny because I'll just sit back and you were like, is the microphone off? I'm like, I don't have to fill the air, but other people do get uncomfortable and fill it, and recognizing. And then it's also being intentional about saying, I've heard your opinion. Thank you very much. I would like to hear from others, or are there dissenting opinions? Because it can change the conversation. And so it's just about being intentional. Certainly when you're leading meetings and recognizing I am passionate about a lot of things. And so I know I'll come across as a bulldozer sometimes, and recognizing, again, take inventory, take step back, give other people the opportunity, because at that point, I could be wrong. Yeah. There could be a better idea.
Imagine.
Got to give people the space to say something.
Absolutely. How do you stay mindful of voices, people in the room, and particularly underrepresented? How do you stay mindful of that?
Yeah, I think representation matters in all aspects of almost everything that we do. And I think that we do have to be thoughtful about the fact that you have a brain, you have a bias. We want to hear people echo our ideas and share those. And again, I think when it comes across as a platitude, but it's not, that being comfortable and embracing like fear and your own discomfort means you should be seeking alternate opinions. You should be doing what you can to say, I don't have that perspective. And no, I can't include everybody in the room, but I can get somebody in the room that can provide that unique perspective that can make the tweak that takes a good program to great, or takes a great program to outstanding, or acknowledges a gap that has to be filled, that creates risk. And so it is about saying and understanding, I as a leader may be the one getting in the way. How do I push back from the table and somehow exit the room for the right person to be included in the conversation that changes? And that's a big deal, because everybody wants to be involved and you want to have your hand on the steering wheel. And sometimes the best leadership is you're giving a chance for it to steer itself and making sure that you have the right people in the room to hear things. And so it is about being very thoughtful about the representation. It is about being, for me, doc, I get super excited about having other docs in the room. Well, geez, our teams are comprised of advanced practitioners, CRNAs. Gosh, nothing happens if our nurse colleagues aren't here. And oh, by the way, we have these fantastic operational colleagues that are like, you know what? That's a great idea. And it's going to fall apart for these
for these 5 reasons. Exactly. Yeah.
And you just have to be thoughtful and recognize that, you want to surround people with similar ideas, but it's very clear when we get those diverse opinions, you're going to get better outcomes.
So how mindful do you stay of your title? How do you stay mindful of the fact that the influence that has on people and their willingness and their ability to speak up and respond?
So yes, it happens. I think that, again, it gets back, it's less vulnerability and more humanity. So you like stories, I'll share it. Getting back to the vulnerable sort of model, I come in, I'm typically in a suit, I have my introduction and everything else. And it used to be, and it still is to a large extent, I was like, I don't, and my own concern about stereotypes of, I don't want to be the funny.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's funny, but I don't want that thing attached to me as that's the reason why you're here. And I'm going to make jokes and I'm going to do this and that and the other. And I'm going to keep it light. But, and so my fault was that I geared very much to that. I'm ultra serious. I'm going to come in, I'm erudite. I'm going to be bringing in literature. I'm doing all of those sorts of things.
Right.
And that was wrong too.
Right.
And so I think that, again, it's helping people to connect to your humanity and saying, look, here are the things. Yes, my name is Greg Johnson. Yes, I'm the Assistant Chief Medical Officer. Yes, I've done these things before.
Yeah.
Here's why I'm here. And here are the things that are important to me. And I typically lead with my kids.
Yeah.
I'm a dad, I'm a doctor, I'm a brother, I'm a son. Like, I am all of these things.
Yeah.
These are what's important to me. And, but I think it is being cognizant of
Yeah.
title can get you into rooms, but it's not going to connect you with people.
Mm-hmm.
Humanity
Mm-hmm.
going to connect you with people. And so what am I going to do to connect as a human being as best I can for whatever environment?
There was another thought that you had talked about in that post about the importance of checking your intent when you are connecting with somebody or when you're communicating with somebody. Are you doing it in terms of building connection, or are you just trying to be comfortable where you want the conversation to go? So how do you pause? How do you check your own intention and be self-aware in the moment? Because that's the hard part.
It's really tough. It is really tough because sometimes you're right. It's like, oh, I'm going to stay comfortable in here. What am I not going to say? And sometimes what am I going to ignore? And I can think of 5 instances in the last 48 hours where it was that mental pause of, what are you doing? And are you actually being like your authentic self? Or are you doing something to either get out of the room or move on? And it's just very difficult. And I think that, again, great advice that I have, and it's always a challenge as you're advancing in leadership of like getting meaningful feedback, knowing that there are people not only on your team, but, in your personal circle that you surround with, and the ones that'll throw you the elbow and go, what was that? And knowing that they are your accountability partners in terms of, I can't do that. And how do I self-correct? And in many instances, it is, I know in that 48-hour period, I had to go back and apologize. I was like, you know what? I'm sorry. I didn't really show up, and can we try again? Again, you're going to be imperfect, but you're right about having to make a mental note that you have to do it.
So is this something for you that's evolved over the years? Is this part of your leadership journey? I'm taking it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Blessed to be surrounded by a lot of people that are willing to provide feedback and willing to throw the elbow and willing to tap you on the shoulder and go, that's not really the guy that I know. And so, who was that?
I'll do better next time. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I know is so important to you is championing inclusion, equity. What role do you think that demonstrating vulnerability and modeling that plays in fostering a more inclusive culture in that regard, do you think?
I think I'll pause and think to answer that, because it's probably the most unique way it's been asked of me. I think that there is an authentic way to champion causes that aren't so much about look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah.
And it's not so much about railing against maybe forces that are not supportive of your view.
Right.
And it's more of communicating very clearly. I believe this. This is why I believe it. This is how I can support believing it. And I think that people, I know I want to see it. I won't speak for other people. I'll speak for myself. Yeah. What I want to see in leaders when they're authentic is, what do you believe? You may not believe in everything that I believe in.
Yeah.
And then I borrow from, I think it was a television show that I heard, is I'm a lifelong holder of minority opinions. But but I think I want to know that my leaders are comfortable in being vulnerable about what they believe in and what they stand for.
Yeah.
And that by being intentional about that and saying, I invite people to have the dialogue with me, whether you agree with me or not, I invite you to dialogue, because at the end of the day, the benefit to both of us is that change in perspective. And so it's important to me to champion that, because, we hear it so often. Nobody talks anymore and there are no discussions. Well, what can I do? Right. I can admire the problem, complain about it like anybody else, or I can say, you know what, my part of being a solution, and it's minor, is just going to say, hey, these are the things that are important to me, and I'm going to talk about and I am open to talking to anybody about them, coming from whatever perspective that you want. You're
Yep.
respectful of me, I'm respectful of you, and we're going
Right.
to those. But you're going to know what I'm about. You're going to know why I'm about it. And you're going to know that I'm unafraid to have that conversation and present it, not as a flag waving
Right.
or
Anything.
chest bearing.
Yeah.
Here's who I am.
Yeah.
Here's who I aspire to continue to be.
Right. Right. And here's what I believe, and I'm open to hearing what you believe and having that dialogue. Yeah. So you've shared a little bit about how in your own journey, your feelings about showing vulnerability, how they've evolved. If you could give a piece of advice to yourself 20 years ago about this kind of balance, what would you say to that, to that person, that Superman 20 years ago?
I'd first tell him, be quiet, close your mouth, get comfortable with silence.
Yeah.
And that what you perceive as a weakness actually can be converted into a strength and something that you didn't anticipate. And most importantly, that by doing so, it allows you to give yourself more grace. And so it's self-serving, absolutely. But the purpose of giving yourself grace is to say, you know what? It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to be wrong.
Yeah.
What are you learning? Are you growing?
Yeah.
And are you connecting with people?
Yeah.
Because you can connect with people in that authentic way. And the results of that, if you only knew what it would mean for you personally, professionally,
Yeah.
You would embrace it in a second.
Yeah. What's an action you think, if you could coach somebody on the spot who struggles with this, what's a small thing that they could try or start doing that you think would move the needle just a little?
I mean, I think that the simplest, and I say simple
but not easy, huh?
simple, but absolutely not easy,
Yeah.
is I do think it is identifying a team member. We're speaking about this from the professional standpoint. I would think it's identifying a team member and trying something that is, yes, it opens the window, but it doesn't feel like you've thrown it open. I think it is just recognizing, like, what does it mean to do this? And I think it's simple, but you also have to alert the other person doing this, because I think most people want to help us do things. And I think most people want to help us to connect. And so I think it's, hey, I want to share this. It's not something I typically share, and the reason is I think this will benefit. It helps us to get over a particular hump. I think in that way, it's easy for the other person to relate and recognize I am trying, and I'm trying to connect with you to be able to achieve the goal. And then hopefully you find that you don't really have to target the goal. It's the goal maybe months or years in the future.
And yes. And in fact, that's an important point, because I think people set way too high expectations of what they're going to be able to achieve in a conversation or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's manage our expectations. Let's start small. I actually really love that suggestion of saying, this is something that I want to try. This is why. This is the goal that I have that I want to try and change. Would you be willing to give me feedback on this, and just start really small?
Yeah.
I think that's great. Yeah. I think that's how we actually make change. It's not these big, huge, massive changes all at once. It's small things, intentional things, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So here's what I want to do as we wrap up our discussion. I'm so grateful for you for this conversation, by the way, Greg. I just thank you.
Well, thanks. My heart is only doing 110 beats per minute as opposed.
Oh my gosh. All right. So I want to do a little rapid fire now. I don't want you to think about these too hard. This is just you as a leader, you as a person. I always love doing this with people as we wrap up the episode. So what's one word that you would use to describe your leadership style?
It's funny. I know you want me to do this rapid fire, but I can't,
It's
because
okay.
I was like sitting there going, I get this in interviews, and I think I have a word describing my leadership style. It's integrative.
Integrative. That's a great word. Yeah. Well, so what's a leadership value that you won't compromise on?
Integrity.
Yeah, for sure. What's the most important habit you've built as a leader?
Pre-reads.
Oh.
I have to be, finding I'm better prepared coming into meetings has been a big change and a game changer.
What is one thing that helps you reset after a tough day?
Riding my bike
Yeah.
or reading.
Or reading. Okay. What's something you used to believe about leadership that you no longer do?
That leaders have to be perfect.
There you go. And what's one of the biggest lessons you've learned from your team?
I think the most important lesson I've learned is that teamwork works. Like it's don't have to carry the entire burden. That when you are surrounded by passionate, skilled, intelligent people, really magnificent things can happen.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Favorite question to ask in a one-on-one?
Ooh. So I actually start all of my one-on-ones that the first 5 minutes, you can't talk about work. You actually have to tell me about whatever you're comfortable describing, but just to recenter that you're a human being. And if you're having a lousy day, I'd rather know early. But my favorite introductory question though is my true favorite icebreaker question is, what's your walk-up song?
Oh, I like that. That's a good one. Yeah. That's a window, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what's a book or a resource that every physician leader should know about?
This was an excellent book that I read last year, and it's called Choke. The book is essentially about the habits that high-performing individuals take to avoid performance anxiety and choking. But it's I laugh because you talk about all these things that you do and everything else, and it was like journaling, meditation, all of these things that you're like, everybody talks about, but it brings the science in of like watching what happens with people who have test anxiety or people who, any form of performance anxiety, and what simply acknowledging what your concern is and writing it down on a piece of paper really unloads yourself. Getting your mind to be able to recognize and settle down. And I don't like meditation, but it's one of those things that you recognize when it's going well of, it doesn't mean that you're clearing your mind. It's okay. I am very concerned about that. And for the next 10 minutes, that's going to go over here.
Right. That sounds like a really good resource, honestly.
It was a good book for me because I was sitting there going, why are you telling me to do all of these things I don't want to do?
Oh, no, that's good. All right, Choke. I'm going to keep that one. All right, 2 more. So leadership superpower that you admire in other people.
So not that I'm negative, but the people who are just like ultra positive, like I am like, wow, I don't know where you get that from, but wow.
Yeah.
Like that is impressive. Nice. And it's not everything is great, even though the Titanic's sinking. It's the, you know what? Hey, we didn't do that. It's just, it's a different level of positivity that again is coming from a place of, I am so confident we're going to be able to do this. Those people, I'm like,
I can trust with that. I call that the optimistic realists, right?
I'm just like, wow.
Yeah. I love it. All right. Last one is one thing every physician leader should try to do this week.
Well, I think the one thing you need to do is you need to find a way to connect with somebody that you haven't. Yeah. And when I say connect, I mean, it's maybe a 5-minute conversation, but find a way to connect with somebody as a human being, like just taking those moments to reinforce our humanity in work, because we do it pretty well most of the time outside of work, but in work of saying, hey, I'm a human being and how you doing and what's going on, and not about your giving something back, but just telling somebody, I care enough to ask how you're doing and what's going on. That's one thing I should do.
That's right. Oh, Greg, this has been amazing. Thank you so, so much. I'm grateful, like I said, thank you for your wisdom and your experience and your openness and being willing to talk about these things. Is there any last thought you could give around the power of being vulnerable in leadership?
I think it's not easy, and it's really not easy to always be consistent. But I think that reminder that you give yourself some grace, you aspire to what you want to be and what you want to be for your people and for your patients. And if you continue doing that, you're probably directionally correct.
That's right. That's right. Well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you, Greg. Thank you so much. I think your organization is lucky to have you. We got a good guy. So thanks for being here with me.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate the kind words.
You're very welcome. See ya. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. I hope you found my conversation with Greg as insightful as I did. His reflections on vulnerability and authenticity and the power of creating space for others are so important, especially in a field like healthcare where trust and human connection really are everything. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or pass it along to a colleague. It really does help us reach more clinician leaders like you who are passionate about making a difference. So, as always, remember that as you go forth and work on your own levels of vulnerability, it's all about progress, not perfection. So be kind to yourselves, and I'll see you next time.